Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, davedelaney.speaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show.
Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Nice Podcast. I am your host, Dave Delaney. Thank you for joining me today. Hey, there's a link in the description of this episode. All you have to do is click it. It goes to friend.nicepodcast.co. Over there is a very brief survey. Please go over and take that survey. And I also want to say thank you to everybody who already has. This will give me feedback into making this show better. Now, I'm feeling pretty confident that today's episode is going to blow your mind because I've got the one and only Marcus Whitney on the show. Now, Marcus is a healthcare venture capitalist. He's an entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author of a kick-ass book on entrepreneurship called Create and Orchestrate, which I highly recommend you check out. Now, Marcus and I go way back to 2007 when I first moved to Nashville. Our former boss, Clint Smith, set us up on a blind date, basically. We went and had a coffee. He was feeling me out for a position with Emma at the time. I didn't really realize that, though. I thought Clint just wanted me to connect with Marcus. And so we met and we had coffee and we just completely hit it off instantly. And in fact, we kind of conceived doing the first Bar Camp Nashville, which is a technology unconference. But we conceived doing this Bar Camp Nashville idea right there over our first coffee together. So we were fast friends, and I love Marcus. He truly is a great guy and someone who I respect and look up to a lot. And he continuously inspires me to keep pushing forward in my own entrepreneurial journey. So you're going to learn a lot today. And, you know, I want to tell you what we talk about, but I'd rather you just sit back or run faster if you're on a treadmill and listen to this interview with Marcus. So without further ado, here we go. What's the nicest thing someone has done for you recently?
Oh, wow. The nicest thing that someone has done for me recently happened literally in the last 60 seconds, which is my wife made avocado toast with chili crunch seasoning from Momofuku and brought it to me.
Rachel is amazing.
That is such a nice thing for her to have done.
That is a very nice thing to do. In fact, actually, yeah. I just got home from going out for lunch with Heather, my wife. And she came home and she was like, let's go out to lunch. So, cool. But that's very cool. That's very nice of her. And avocado toast, man.
Oh, dude, it's so good.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like when you said what was the last nice thing that somebody's done for you, it was very easy for me to think about who, because over the course of this pandemic, my wife has been doing so many incredibly nice things for me. And I just had to think, well, what was the most recent nice thing? And it was, the toast. So
what has inspired her beyond, I personally know Rachel. I know she's fantastic, but what do you think makes her be so mindful of providing nice things?
I just feel like it's a lot of who she is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Why does she do that? I mean, I feel like it's who she is. It's how she was raised, to be nice and to be thoughtful. Her parents are very nice and thoughtful people. So yeah, I mean, I would probably just say it's just kind of a fundamental part of who she is.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, a lot of that can be taught, right? It's the way we treat our families and our kids and the way we're raising our people, yeah, there a lot can be said to that. So congratulations on creating, and orchestrating a book, called Create and Orchestrate. Yeah. So tell me, the book was fantastic. First of all, I was very excited when it finally dropped, and I was, and absorbed it pretty quickly. Tell me about the book. Tell me about how it came to be and what inspired it. And you also did the book in sort of a different way as far as, self-publishing and going through, like a Kickstarter. So do you want to start maybe there, and then we can talk a little bit about what's inside that book? Yeah,
for sure. The book was conceived as an idea and an initiative, in 2015. When I sort of looked up at myself and what had happened in the previous 15 years. And for context, I moved to Nashville in 2000, and I was a college dropout waiting tables with a young family, and taught myself how to code, and then used that skill to then become employed in a fast-growing tech company, get a salary. And then over the course of 15 years, just kind of rolled those skills, those technology skills, into management skills, into leadership skills, into entrepreneurship, into venture capital. It's certainly, I think, outkicked my coverage given what I am on paper, which is, a black male college dropout in America, with two kids. So I just sort of thought that there was probably something in my story that would help or inspire other people. I was really sort of pushed to that after I did a TEDx Nashville talk that went very well. And so that was the thought. And I was like, well, the best way to validate if that's true is to do a Kickstarter. And then the Kickstarter was achieved, and it was like, okay, I got to do this. When I started doing it, I felt very good. I was very confident, but then it hit me that I didn't really know how to write a book. And the process of learning how to write a book was fairly grueling. I was glad that I was not, under the gun with a publisher, just sort of with the people that backed the Kickstarter, because I really needed to develop as a writer and develop as someone who could put together a body of work. And I didn't want to do an okay book. I wanted to do – it was the first book, so I didn't necessarily aspire to have a great first book, but certainly a very good one. I wanted the first book to be very good. And so that was difficult. And then, life started happening, and I started having difficulties in business. And then I started really having some imposter syndrome stuff like, should I even be writing this book, given some of the stuff I'm currently experiencing. Came out on the other side of that, and things ended up being really successful. And it changed the flavor of the book. I was able to write a book that highlighted and featured in a pretty prominent way some of the shortcomings and the failings, because I learned tremendous and important lessons from them. And I thought, what better gift to put in a book to somebody than sharing the failure and the lesson, such that hopefully they don't have to repeat it and go through the same level of pain. Also, some important things happened over the course of the 5 years that I wrote the book that I think also were successes and made the book that much more rich, such as achieving professional soccer in Nashville and the success of Jumpstart Foundry and everything we've done with the VC fund. So, I feel it's one of those things that all things happen in the right amount of time. And while I certainly don't want to go through the pain of writing the book, I'm very happy with the way it turned out.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was. I think it is a great book. Interesting. Not interesting. Not a surprise at all, because I've written a book as well, and I know. And you mentioned the dreaded imposter syndrome, and I remember as I was writing my book, I was actually literally Googling imposter syndrome for authors and, and self-doubt for authors, and finding so many articles about it. And belonging to some groups of other authors, I started, networking with other authors and learning that this is so not uncommon. Like, everybody goes through this who writes a book.
And what a dark place, and what an unexpected dark place,
It's horrible.
It is terrible. It's really, really bad. But I will say, I mean, you've published a book, and I remember when you published your book, and I could just like feel how proud you were of the finished product, and that you had made it to the other side of it. And I really can relate to that now. I mean, every time I look at it, I just think, wow, that just represents me overcoming all of that darkness, that period, the insecurity, I think if you've never written a book before, just try to imagine you sit down, you write 10,000 words or whatever, you get it out, you feel really glad that you got it out, and you go back 2-3 days later and you go to read it, and it's just awful. I mean, the sentences are literally just poorly structured sentences. And you read it and you're like, this is not engaging at all. And it also has all this stuff where you assume that the reader knew what you were talking about and you just glossed over something, and it's just this iterative process of doing that over and over again. Never mind just how difficult it is to get 10,000 words out of your head. It's hard. But it is a really, really valuable thing to do. And I think most people should try.
How can authors or aspiring authors be nicer to themselves?
Wow, what a great question. I need to think about that. I think with most things, solitude is bad, right? And so it was a long time before I really found community as a writer, as an author. As soon as I did, things were immediately better. Talking to people, especially people who had been there before, that was very, very, very helpful. And I think that the thing about community is it should result in you feeling that this path you're walking is a well-trodden path, and that what you're feeling is not something personal to you. It's more about this journey that you decided to go on and go through. I think that's just a helpful framing, because when you don't have that, then you start to really make harsh, irrational judgments about yourself, and that are just not true.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think it's interesting what you write about in your book, and I wanted to ask you about it, about manifestation. So you wrote, and I'll quote here, "I never said that I was a great or even a good programmer. I just believed I was a programmer. This small tweak of believing we already are what we want to be, rather than booming it has significant downstream effects." Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on manifestation, and how it applied to you becoming a programmer, and maybe how it applies to becoming an author in a way.
I think that I have arrived at a place in my life where I have tremendous respect for the impact that the thoughts that I think have on me, and maybe even more how what I do with those thoughts, right? There's all sorts of weirdo thoughts that fly through my head, and I just sort of look at them and laugh or, dismiss them. But it's the interplay of how we as spiritual beings, the true essence of who we are, how we engage with those thoughts. And generally speaking, you need to just do the level of engagement that's going to be helpful as a basic rule. And so if thinking about something helps you, then it's good. And if it doesn't help you, then it's not good. And so it is helpful to think of yourself as the thing that you're trying to become, is as long as it quiets down the chatter in your head about the imposter syndrome, because that's just not that helpful.
Right.
And it also doesn't give you a false sense of confidence that somehow you don't actually need to work really hard. And so it's about threading that needle, right? It's about how do you not lie to yourself so much that everyone looks at you and thinks you're crazy, because what you're saying you are is obviously not true, but you have the tools. It's from a psychic self-defense perspective, you have the tools to overcome the inner talk that's going to be negative. You got to kind of deal with both. It's the inner conversation and the outer conversation, and you got to navigate how do you thread that needle. And so for me, just establishing a baseline of me being something without qualifying, I'm good, I'm great, I'm terrible, it's a trick, basically. It's a tactic to be able to do that.
Interesting. And I like the idea of psychic self-defense, like where you can kind of protect yourself in a sense of, and yeah, like for me, I go through, my own like challenges there of self-doubt and self-confidence and things like that. But then realizing like, if like in order for me to get where I need to be going, I can't just stop. I've been reading, The Magic of Thinking Big. Do you know that book?
I don't know that book.
It's great. It's from I think the 1980s. It needs to be revised a little bit. It's a little he kind of thing. Male, yep. Not like giggle. But in it, he talks about like if you are, if you're driving your car down a road and and there's a detour, you're not going to like stop and abandon your car. Right. Right. And you're not going to just pull over and wait for a week while the detour's, cleaned up. You're just going to go the other way and figure out how to get to where you're going.
That's right.
And I love that thought of kind of hitting these obstacles along the way, but then making sure that you remain on track. Like what are some obstacles that you've faced and how do you find your way back?
It is a strength of mine to stay focused on the direction that I'm going or stay focused on the goal I'm trying to achieve. Obstacles are always going to happen, and life is always going to bring uncertainties and difficulties. And there's nothing I can do about that. So I just stay pretty anchored every single day. I have, a fairly clear purpose at any given point in my time, in time in my life. It's like when you and I met, I was leaving Emma to go start a business, and then we decided we were going to do bar camp. It's like, I always have something that I'm doing. And I feel like when you have that thing and you have that purpose, you are less likely to be long-term derailed by these different things that happen. It doesn't mean that these incidents won't happen and they won't create an emotional response that is challenging and difficult to overcome. Of course that will happen. But I think that you can get back on track, when your focus is on the thing that really, really matters. And the obstacle is unavoidable and just sort of makes the story that much more interesting.
And at what point does the universe sort of tell you, like you have to sort of come to accept what the universe is telling you, and then here comes that P word, pivot, right? Where you then have to decide, okay, well, maybe I need to pivot what I'm doing. You said yourself, like it took you, was it 5 years, right, to write the book?
Yes.
Right. So, and you weren't writing, I imagine, or it would have been way longer for all those 5 years. So
that's right.
I'm sure you were going through periods where and some of those, as we talked about already, were just walls that you hit. And I don't mean, yes. I mean, you hit, but any author hits for sure.
Yeah, but they were certainly my walls. No question. I hit walls.
Yeah. But then you realize like there are things like like the saying always is like, nobody writes a book in order to like make money from it.
Yes.
Those days are kind of gone in a lot of ways. So, you've got to keep your family fed, so to speak, and do that. So at what point do you decide, and I don't mean you, Marcus, I just mean a listener who's listening, what point do you realize like, okay, wait a minute, I can't keep pushing forward on this thing? Or when should I hit pause?
Yeah. So, that's a really interesting question. And I think I've always been relatively bad at making the call on that moment because I have a lot of faith in my ability. And also, I am not that good at accepting sunk costs. You know what I mean? In terms of time. My hope is that having written the book, that I can sort of see in reflection how those failures are just incredible learning opportunities, and they bolster the next thing that I'm going to do. They create real meaningful learning that greatly improves the chances I'll be successful next time. So my hope is that I will quit things faster. At the moment, all the things that I'm doing are working pretty good. But actually, you know what? I just decided to stop doing a podcast. You've started one. I just decided to stop doing one, not indefinitely. But I could feel that the direction I was evolving in personally, and also that the big project I was working on, a new fund that I'm raising, were not aligned with either the cadence and even maybe the format of the podcast I was doing. And it was like, okay, this thing has run its course. It was super helpful for this window of time, and I got a lot out of it personally. I got a lot out of it. And now maybe it's time to give it a break and focus my energy elsewhere for a minute. I can always come back to it. I just sort of made that decision. And it was a really great decision to come to, because I had a lot of trust in myself that it was a decision that only I could make, and that if I failed to make it, I actually could be impairing a much greater opportunity for myself.
We've talked about pivoting. You were talking about maybe cooling off a little bit, or taking a step back from focusing on your personal brand. I mean, you've got such a great, strong personal brand. And you've got, a lot of great podcast content and YouTube content, and of course, the other, your book, of course, and your TEDx talk. But it does come, like, I think sometimes about these 3 C's. And for the longest time, I talked and spoke and thought a lot about creating and consuming, and finding the balance between creating and consuming. I talk to my kids about this, right? I mean, they're kids growing up in the digital age, and all they do is consume. And I'm like, you've got to create stuff with what you're learning. So if you're learning how to, Sam's a big gamer. He loves gaming. Ella loves TikTok and things like that. So it's like, not that I want her necessarily to create TikToks. Good God. But she dabbles privately anyway. And it's fun because she's into filmmaking and stuff. So it's cool that way.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then Sam, he's learning how to render and how to do like kind of online graphics, and he's
amazing.
He's getting there. I mean, he's very early on, but I'm trying to encourage them. And this is something I talk to people a lot about, is finding that balance between creating and consuming, so that you're not only consuming stuff, but you're not also just creating things. You've got to find that balance. But I realize there's a third C in that, and that is conversions, right?
Yeah.
Where, hey, I can create and consume, like I find the perfect ratio, but if I'm not working or making money, that's going to be difficult, right?
Yeah, man.
So finding that conversion in there is important.
I'm so glad you said that. I mean, when I got serious about raising this fund, I ran through the math on that, right? And I was kind of like, okay, I've got all this content that's out there already. I've been doing it, blah, 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 all these different channels. And there was definitely kind of a for what moment. You know what I mean? Where I was like, okay, what am I really trying to achieve with this? And I think I came down to this idea of I'm trying to work through a certain perspective in the world. Like, how do I see things? And I felt like I was starting to get diminishing return on that. I felt like I was having these conversations with people, and no knock on them. It's just I was not. I was kind of full from that perspective. You know, I had done as much as I could for that period of time there, and then I started thinking about the conversion piece, and it was like, man, I've got a fantastic opportunity to get this fund off the ground. And the way that funds work, many people will be very, very, very jealous of this. But the way that funds work is, you know, you bust hump for a period of time to get it off the ground. But once you do that, it's pretty much locked in for the investment period, you know, as long as you don't do anything fraudulent, you know. It's pretty much like there. And you've raised the funds, and then it's a matter of investing the funds and doing a great job through that process. And so, you know, my investment period is 4 years from the day I close the fund, which is December 18th of this year. And that means I have 4 years where I don't have to worry about, like, sales. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like, I've never had 4 years where I didn't have to worry about sales. You know what I mean? So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to totally focus on this for a second. Creating platforms will be there. You know what I mean? They'll evolve. I'll probably be refreshed and renewed and excited to kind of reapproach it. But, you know, I've got this window of opportunity where I can go do this incredibly meaningful fund that I feel is, you know, part of my purpose for the next 10, 15 years of my life.
Yep.
I can go make that a reality and actually, you know, build quite a bit of de-stress in my life for the long term, and free up a bunch of space for the next book, you know, for rethinking about how to do a podcast. So it was a trade-off, you know. I did some evaluation and just sort of decided it was time to lock in some conversions, as you say.
Yeah. Well, I think listeners are probably leaning in as you're saying, wait a minute, I could start a fund and have 4 years and not having to do sales. Where do I sign?
Yeah, man.
But and I want to talk about this fund, and I want to talk about what you've built here, because I think it's incredibly, well, I think it's awesome. First of all, it's very important work as well. So, you know, and you're doing it through Jumpstart Foundry, right?
Yeah. We've tried to really mature our platform over the last year, because we're now in our 7th year in business, and we tried so many different things over the previous 6 years. You know, we're a very scrappy little startup, but at this point, you know, we're kind of a young adult, I would say, in the venture space, and we needed to grow up and mature a little bit. So, you know, we now refer to our business as Jumpstart Health Investors. We are venture investors in early stage healthcare businesses. That's what we do. We have a slate of fund families that sort of focus in different stages. So Jumpstart Foundry, which was our first ever fund family, we've been investing for the last 6 years. This will be our 7th year investing out of that fund family. Invest in pre-seed stage companies, very, very early companies, and we do lots of investments every year, 20 or more investments a year. Jumpstart Capital is, you know, our standard Series A based fund, writes bigger checks, you know, $1 million and up size checks. And we are now starting a third fund family that I'm heading up called Jumpstart Nova, which will be investing in seed and Series A stage companies that have Black founders, focused on a very, very underrepresented segment of great founders who just, you know, have historically not had access to venture capital. Yeah,
and did this come from? You wrote an amazing Medium post on Medium called "Calling Up Nashville's Healthcare Leaders," and you made some points in there Like enough to, some of the notes I took, like enough to fund 3 country clubs with spare change, one of which you're not allowed to join. I made a note of that. Cause I'm like, wait, which freaking country club will not let you join? Cause I want to go and, that's insane to me. But yeah, so tell me a little bit about how this came to be. You obviously, you obviously did a lot of research in that piece, and you shared some pretty sobering thoughts and statistics in that. So yeah, what led you to writing this article? And then is it the article that led to the fund?
It is the article that led to the fund. And what led me to write the article was, that in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, I got calls from friends of mine who are white males in their 50s, who run multi-billion-dollar businesses, who were, we were just having conversations we had never really had before. And they were about race. They were about inequity. They were conversations where they were asking questions in a way that, they hadn't before. And it signaled to me that we were entering an era where we were going to be having different conversations than we had had previously. I knew from those conversations that the George Floyd moment was, in a way, a tipping point. And, as it is clearly proven to have been. Mm-hmm. And so with that, it forced me to then look at myself and what my position enabled me to uniquely do. That was the thing I was searching for. I was like, okay, in this moment where we have eyes and ears and hearts open to a conversation that really hasn't been available to us before, what thing can I add to the conversation that I'm uniquely qualified to do? And that's where the note came from. I am the only Black healthcare venture capital partner in Nashville. Nashville is a very, very strong healthcare market and a very strong healthcare venture capital market. And, it was a topic that I knew about intimately through my own experience and through a bunch of research that I had done. It was interesting. Like, I didn't have to research to write it because I knew it all.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the unique qualification there was I woke up on a Sunday and I was like, holy crap, I got to write this thing. And I sat down and I wrote that in an hour. I didn't need any research for it. So yeah, the purpose was just to be able to use my voice to contribute positively to this conversation about, improving equity in this country and do it in a way that I thought would be effective. And, thank goodness I had grown so much as a writer in the last 5 years working on the book, right? Because writing is such an important and valuable skill. And I got a lot better at it. And so I think that came through in the letter. A lot of people who reached out to me afterwards who were in powerful positions in the healthcare industry remarked about the quality of the writing itself, and it was a single piece of writing that did in fact lead to the founding of a brand new venture fund on our Jumpstart platform. So yeah,
and I love the fact that getting back to this sort of create, consume, convert or convert thing is you had these affluent white sort of corporate type, leaders in the healthcare community reaching out to you. And this gave you an opportunity, where some companies may completely have failed on sort of, diversity in the workplace and things. Companies are starting now more than ever to start focusing on that, hiring the right people and so on. But you gave them an opportunity to say, you know what, if you want to help, here's a way to help. You've got money, cut a check and help invest in these companies.
That's right.
Like, it's a perfect situation for that. And I love that. I love that you've been able to do that. So tell us about, a little bit, because in that article you talked about Samuel Howard from Phoenix Holdings.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that story, because I watched the interviews with him and things afterwards because I found it was really interesting. But I learned about that from your article.
Yeah. So Sam is someone who unfortunately I never got to meet. He passed away last year, and he was somebody who was a business legend in Nashville, and I think also like a storied Nashville civic leader, and if you were a Black entrepreneur who had been around and talked to people who had been here for a while, kind of the OGs of the space, you heard about Sam and you heard about the success of his story. It actually was not just Sam. There was another gentleman named Tony Seabram. Who the two of them had very, very, very similar stories. They built very successful businesses in the healthcare space, and they ran into real challenges, that are largely believed to have been attributed to the success and the fact that they were, Black men in the South. And I think, when you look at the timing of the rise of their businesses, it's not hard to believe it, and so, yeah, Sam was charged with sort of a battery of things really around, not being in compliance from an accounting and a tax perspective. And, he spent a lot of money defending himself and the business, and in the end was ultimately exonerated. But, that doesn't take away the time and the energy and the legal money, that he spent, and kind of put a real damper on the enterprise that he had built. So, yeah, it's it's just another part of the the sad legacy of systemic racism in America, unfortunately.
Yeah. Are you feeling more confident in seeing, how people like the Black Lives Matter movement, but also just how people are being more vocal? I mean, there are certainly no shortages of the other side of that with rednecks and what happened at the Capitol and so forth. But do you feel more confident in how the world is moving?
I was telling Rachel the other morning on one of our morning runs, and it wasn't something I was thrilled about, but just sort of talking about all of the loss that has happened in the history of humanity in order to make progress, and how our generation has largely avoided that. And I think, we've only really read about it for the most part.
Right.
We've been in this era where we sort of believe that civilization has evolved beyond, I'll just say the word, but some of the violence that has occurred in the past in order for progress to be made, and I certainly hope that is the truth. And at the same time, I understand that it might not be. I understand that there are and have been for maybe the entirety of human existence, really, really negative forces out there. And, we've come very close too. We've had some really, really close calls. The Nazis were a really close call. The world could have ended up being a very different place.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the world's response to the Nazis in France, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at what's happening in the world today and what happened at the Capitol, with the counting of the Electoral College votes, and just say, hey, there's still work to do. There's still work to do.
Absolutely. I think a lot about, and something you actually mentioned earlier, I think about, writing your book, but about the sunk cost fallacy. And I think it's something that I'm a little obsessed about in a way, and in the idea of just becoming so invested in something that it's really hard to then pivot or deny it or turn your head to it. And, when you talk about that and the idea of like investing tons of your hours and energy into writing, and not giving up, that's one thing. But the sunk cost fallacy also applies to communities. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try it. Like, I love Brene Brown's work, and I'm always trying to think of how to approach life in an empathetic way. And it's number 4 in your 7 list of leadership communication tips, by the way, empathy.
Yeah.
And the idea of putting yourselves in the shoes of other people. And I try to think about that. And I came across, there's a podcast I really like called You Are Not So Smart, which is fantastic. And he interviewed the makers of a documentary about flat earthers. And the documentary is on Netflix. It's called Behind the Curve. And it's a really great movie because, I mean, you watch it with like kind of, tongue in cheek, kind of have a laugh because these people are crazy, flat earth, what the heck? But then you realize through the movie, this is a prime example of the sunk cost fallacy because they find their community who are so invested in this idea that the world is flat that they then invest in it. They go to conferences. They only talk. They become friends with these people, and they find community based on this thing. Yeah. But then through the movie, they start to disprove this theory, and they still find ways around proving or disproving this. They say, well, obviously the test didn't work. We're going to have to try it again. And they're investing tens of thousands of dollars into different tools and tests and things. And I think the same can be said for, and it's not to make excuses for people either, but when you think of like people who, are still to this day, like big hardcore, Trump supporters or whomever. And it's because they live in these tiny little areas. Perhaps maybe they're rural, maybe they're surrounded by other people who also their friends, their family. And so for you to turn, not you, but for them to turn their backs on Trump because Trump is the thing that's holding them all together. And it's the same that could be said to religion or other things where if you turn your back on something suddenly, and if you live in a place where you don't have a lot of people around, suddenly you're alone and people fear being alone. And so this sunk cost fallacy of being part of these, a part of these, horrible groups, in my opinion. But these groups where suddenly, I think now people are starting to realize, but at the same time, there are still, as we saw at the Capitol, there are still plenty of people. And in the election results, there are plenty of people who still believe this stuff. And I don't know if there's a question there, but I guess, I hope that, people can find community and I think part of it is, I interviewed Chris Brogan and he talked a lot about authenticity, but rather not so much authenticity because he kind of hates the word, but rather bravery.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's about. I think it's about being brave to admit when you're maybe misguided or wrong and just say, you know what? I thought I was this, but I'm that, or I thought this way, but you know what? I'm open to whatever.
It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And it is a very courageous thing to do. You sort of started this conversation talking about Brene Brown. It is a very, very courageous thing to do. And, I am, look, Dave, we talked about, the drive between Nashville and Grayton Beach and, the hundreds of Trump flags that you see. Mm-hmm. And, just from a perspective of empathy, I can totally disconnect the fact that many, not all, but that many of those Trump flags were flying right next to a rebel flag, right? Mm-hmm. I can separate that from the fact that these were also homes in these forgotten communities where industry is left. And I just think that we have to think about what are they actually fighting for?
Right.
And is there any merit to it? Let's take the racism aside for a second, mm-hmm. And just sort of think about these these communities and what has happened in this country over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years where opportunity has hyper consolidated into, a short list of cities.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not just on the coast, Columbus, Ohio is like killing it. Right. So it's really about urban centers, and how much we've consolidated economic, achievement and empowerment into urban centers. And, I just think that, we have to try to see the people, we have to try to see the people, not necessarily always see the cause. I'm not in any way, shape, or form condoning or making an excuse for what happened. I'm talking about the larger issue, right?
Yeah.
The larger issue of the inability that we have to sort of relate right now. And it does, at the end of the day, boil down to a lack of empathy.
Yeah, it does. It does. What is Marcus Whitney's views on vulnerability?
I'm not a master at it by any means, but over the last 2 years, I have tried to practice it more. I practiced it a lot when I decided to get sober, just because I couldn't drinking was such an important part of who I was in the world, that when I decided to not drink, I just felt like I needed to proactively share that. To kind of protect myself.
Yeah.
A lot of people would be like, oh, yes, you're so brave for talking about the fact that you're sober now. And I'm like, to a degree, I'm trying to avoid people asking me to like go out for a drink all the time.
Right.
So, I just think that, when you, here's what I found. I put a bunch of stuff on my website about like divorce and, getting sober and failing businesses and, all these different kinds of things. Right. And what I find is that often when I talk to people for the very first time, and often these will be like, successful people, CEOs of successful companies and stuff. If they've Googled me and if they've gone to the website and they've checked it out, they'll start with the real stuff. It's like, I don't have to screw around with small talk. It's like people will jump right in and they'll be like, well, you and I have something in common. We've both been divorced. Or you and I have something in common. We both, I've got 10 years. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I'm only at 2. So you got to tell me like how the next 8 are going to be. You know what I mean? And, I think that it allows other people, like if you proactively lay your armor down, it gives people a cue that they can do the same.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And I am the beneficiary of that, because that means I have much richer interactions with people.
Yeah, and that really does, and what a prime example of being an effective leader, right? But
I don't feel that comfortable saying that about myself in terms of like prime example of being a leader, but I do feel that it signals to other people what leadership looks like. Yeah. I feel that it helps people, because none of it. Here's the super interesting thing about it, right? It's like I will say all that stuff, and at the same time, I will like crush the execution of everything I'm doing. So like, there's no connection, between other than a positive one. There's a positive correlation between the fact that I'm not drinking and I'm like, shipping my book and raising a fund and, and like writing great stuff. And, there's a positive correlation, but there's no negative correlation between it.
We're hitting the lightning round here. So,
okay.
So let me ask you this. Who is someone that was especially nice to you in your career?
Especially nice to me in my career. I feel, and it's really, really interesting to say this, because I don't think I thought it at the time, but it's the reason why I had Clint write the foreword to my book. I think that Clint and Will were very, very nice to me. These
are the co-founders of Emma,
yes.
Which is where we both worked a while back. Yes.
That's right. having had other bosses and partners and things like that since them, I feel they were very nice to me. Yes.
Yeah, they were working for them was interesting when I think I was employee like 30 or something, and we were all in a house crammed together in Hillsborough Village in Nashville here. And I remember each room of this house had a credit card type of debit card for the local coffee shop, Fido.
Yes.
And people would bitch and complain that it ran out of credit.
Yeah.
Or they complain that like we didn't have some sort of whatever flavor energy bar that costs like $3 or $4 a bar or something. And I'm like, I came from like corporate companies. Like, I'm like, guys, you have no idea how good you have it. These kids today with their tech startups.
Yes. We had it really, really good.
It was pretty sweet. Yeah. We were definitely keeping Fido in business, I think, back then too.
Yes.
All right. Complete this sentence. Nice guys and gals finish.
Well.
Ooh, I like that. What's a nice book you recommend to the nice makers listening?
I think Atomic Habits is a nice book. I think that it does a really good job of getting you to focus on the small things and seeing how the small things add up, and kind of takes some of the pressure off of always trying to set big goals. I didn't even set any goals for this year, like New Year's goals and stuff. I just have a small and growing list of habits that are really simple, like, make my bed every day. And I notice I can't even do that every day, so I think that's a really, nice book.
That's great.
Atomic Habits. I like it.
How is Marcus nice to himself?
When Marcus is nice to himself. So you know what? Probably the nicest thing that I've been doing consistently is really just letting myself prioritize getting 7 hours of sleep a night. That's just probably the nicest thing I've done because, as much as I think meditation is important and, stretching and mobility work and drinking a bunch of water, I can say with pretty strong certainty that nothing impacts my day more than the quality of the night of sleep that I got before. Nothing. And so I've been really focused on that. And I'm very happy with myself about it.
It's pretty amazing when you stop drinking how your sleep changes.
Oh, it's crazy, Dave. And the really crazy thing is without drinking, you can still have a bad night's sleep.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And then you really realize, oh my gosh, what I was doing before, right? You really just start, you just pay attention a lot more. Yeah. Sleep is just, I can't say enough about it. I was really into intermittent fasting and drinking water. And by the way, everything I'm saying I was into, I still do, but sleep, top of the list, man. Top of the list. That's the thing.
And I'm speaking from experience too. I'm now, I think a little over 7 months sober. So.
Oh yeah, your sleep is probably starting to get real good. You're probably starting to get nice dreams and.
Yeah. It's weird, and even remembering going to sleep. Not that things were that bad, not for a long time, but
no, but
the old blackouts.
It doesn't take much. Look, I mean, this is the thing that we kind of learned, right? Is that it only takes 2 drinks close to sleep to basically knock your brain out. You know what I mean? It's not even like you were over the top. That it's just that's how it works. That's how the chemistry works.
Yeah.
So anyway,
if you had a billboard, what would it say?
Oh, if I had a billboard, what would it say? It would probably say, "You can do it." It's kind of, it's it's kind of corny, but it's a billboard, right? So it's got to be brief, and people's got, and then I would want to pick people up. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I would probably say you can do it,
but not pick people up under the billboard. That would be odd. Yeah,
no, definitely not trying to do that to people. I respect people's space and their, and their bodies.
Absolutely. All right. How can nice makers find out more about you, Marcus?
So, hopefully at some point I will return to posting. I've sort of taken an unofficial leave from social like you did intentionally over the summer. I'm still there. I'm not like off, but man, I'm like pretty inactive. But, Marcus Whitney, marcuswhitney.com, you can subscribe to my newsletter that I'm not sending at the moment, or, you can subscribe to my podcast that I'm not publishing at the moment, or you can subscribe to my social channels that I'm not posting on at the moment. But, I'm still here. And, if you send me a message, I'll respond, but yeah, I'll get back to it when I feel like I really have something great to say. But, you can just find me by my name online on any platform, even the ones I don't even use, like TikTok. I'm still there.
What about Clubhouse? You're not on Clubhouse yet?
I'm on Clubhouse.
Actually, Clubhouse is pretty cool. Actually, I'm actually enjoying it.
Yep, I'm on Clubhouse. I lurk. I don't go on the stages. I don't have the energy for that. But I lurk and I sit in the audience and I listen. And Clubhouse is cool.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. It has been a pleasure as always catching up with you.
Thank you, my friend Dave.
Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. Theme music provided by Alistair Crystal at alistaircrystal.ca. Hey, if you enjoyed the conversation, please take a moment to leave us a review. The links are in the description. I'll have more of that soon. Did you know that new subscribers of the Nice Maker email newsletter receive a free copy of my little ebook, Improve with Improv? Each Friday, I share nice stories, tools, tips, and much more, and you can grab it now from nicemaker.co or by clicking the link in the episode description. I'm Dave Delaney. Take care and be nice.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? T. Adeola hosts a great podcast called Tiny Giants. T, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
We are the creator economy show that's about careers, not celebrity. Right? So who should listen to this show are the parents of young people who want to know more about the creator economy and why that's a career path for their children, or the young people themselves.
Amazing. Where can the young people or the parents subscribe?
You can find us at tinygiants.tech or wherever you get these podcasts, these fine podcasts. And you can also find us at the Marketing Podcast Network, which is marketingpodcast.net.
You heard him. Go subscribe.